Welcome to the Dad Code Podcast, where real dads come for real talk and no BS. We are your hosts, Blake Melton and Bradley Newberry. Good afternoon, Bradley.
Man, good afternoon. It's a glorious day.
Yes, it is.
To discuss some sports. What are we going to be talking about?
Well, today we are going to be doing our 2021 SEC West prediction show.
Yeah.
There's bound to be some controversy.
Of course. What we'll do, just to give you a quick preview of the show, we'll talk about each team, how they fared last year. We'll discuss each team's coach, players to watch for, and then just some general thoughts and notes about each team. But let's just jump right into it. We're going to start with the Ole Miss, whatever we call them.
Yeah, I don't think we can call them by their old name.
Ole Miss. Last year, they were 5-5 overall, 4-5 in the SEC. Their coach is Coach Lane Kiffin. He is 46 years old, and he has a scheduled salary of $3.9 million.
The Lane train is in town.
Full effect.
Absolutely.
This gentleman is an offensive-minded coach. Yep. As we've seen, he used to be the offensive coordinator there at Alabama.
Yeah.
At others.
Had a lot of success. Had a lot of success with offense everywhere he's been. So
Florida Atlantic.
Yeah.
USC. Oakland Raiders.
Well, sometimes it just doesn't translate.
I mean, out of the SEC, this gentleman gets a lot of respect from Coach Saban, Coach O down in LSU.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
They have a lot of good things to say about him. He won 2 Conference USA titles in 3 years at Florida Atlantic.
It's impressive.
So
There's no doubt.
He knows ball.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it's in his blood. I mean, his dad, Monty Kiffin. Golly, how many years did he coach in the NFL? Good grief. I mean, he's a legend in and of himself. So.
Yeah. Do you have any initial thoughts about Ole Miss?
Yeah, I think they're a solid team. They lost their 2 best receivers to the NFL draft, so they're going to have a new receiving core. Matt Corral, I guess is how you pronounce it, Corral. But he shows some promise, but he cannot throw anywhere near as many interceptions as he did last year. Yeah. And the defense just has to do better. I mean, they gave up way too many points per game last year. You can't win in the SEC whenever you give up more than 30 points a game, in my opinion. So,
not in this league. This is not Florida Atlantic, MTSU.
No, this is defense wins games in the SEC. So, for me, it's all about can they reload at the wide receiver position? Can Corral, however I pronounce it, can he get better in and of himself? And can the defense step it up? Because that has to happen for them to even have a chance, in my opinion.
I completely agree. This was statistically the worst defense in the SEC last year, allowing almost 40 points per game, as we touched on. The question marks are centered around the quarterback. I mean, this is the gentleman that's going to be touching the ball the entire game.
You can't win. This will be a theme, I'm sure. You can't win in the SEC without a quarterback that protects the ball.
Now, I can tell you that a player to watch for last year and coming into this season, Jerrion Ealy. He is believe it or not, he is a 2-way Ole Miss sports star.
Okay.
So he not only in football, but plays Ole Miss baseball. He was drafted.
That's
in
big
Major
time
League
baseball
draft.
That's big time baseball.
It really is, man. So this is an athlete. Last year he had 745 rushing yards, averaged 5.1 per carry, 9 touchdowns, and he set the Ole Miss rushing record against Southeast Louisiana in 2019 by rushing for 273 yards. So just a name to remember, Ealy.
Okay. Yeah.
Ole Miss.
We'll have to remember that one. I'm sure that will be a huge part of their success.
I think so.
If they're going to be successful, they're going to have to go through guys like that.
So if they've got a young quarterback, young receivers, that's the easy thing to do is run the ball, quick screens. We may be seeing a lot of this gentleman's name.
Yeah, I mean, running people, when you can gain those rushing yards, it definitely takes a lot of pressure off your quarterback and your receiving core as well.
So that's a quick rundown on Ole Miss, unless you had any other thoughts.
That's all I got.
All right, so next we're going to talk about the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Last year, this team was 4-7 overall, 3-7 in SEC play. Their head coach is Coach Mike Leach. He is 60 years old
Yeah.
with a salary of $5 million for this year. He is known for the air raid offense.
Air raid.
In 2017, he was nearly hired by the UT Vols, except for at the last moment, the AD got canned.
Yeah.
And they went in a totally different direction at the last moment.
Yeah.
They were actually having
I think
dinner.
that was almost a done deal.
They were at the dinner table. I read.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too. But yeah, Mississippi State, for me, it's all about Mike Leach and the air raid offense. I mean, he's a guy, with his offense, he causes chaos everywhere he goes. He beats teams, he competes with teams that he's not supposed to be competing with teams that he shouldn't be competing with those teams. So I think Mississippi State this year, they could be a spoiler in the West for some people. I'm not going to sit here and say that they're going to win the West, but I can tell you that their style of offense, it's one of those that it could go either way. If they get a lot of splash plays, a lot of deep balls, there's Mike Leach, there's nothing off the table. But they have to be better on turnovers. They have to be. They had a horrible turnover ratio last year. And obviously defense, once again, there's a theme here with the SEC. They got to play better defense. You can't give up a bunch of points, and you can't turn the ball over and put the pressure on your defense so often.
Unlike Ole Miss, I believe Mississippi State has set themselves up for a better chance at playing defense. They really showed pretty well, actually, in a very, very tough SEC West.
Yeah.
When you're thinking about the likes of Alabama, LSU, Texas A&M, hell, even Auburn.
Well, the thing is with these types of coaches, that's what you worry about, right? Is are they going to be able to recruit defensive players? Are they going to be able to hire the right people? Is it on their mind? It has to be in the SEC because some of these coaches that come from outside of SEC world, the SEC community, the SEC family, they may or may not understand that if you can't play defense, it doesn't matter how many points you can score.
No. Yeah, I've got a nice quote from old Coach Leach. He says, quote,
there's a lot of them, I'm sure.
Quote, I think 12 teams, and this is in reference to a college football playoff. I think 12 teams is a huge step in the right direction, but I would like to see a 64-team playoff.
That sounds like something he would say.
Everybody, come on down. But, man, some of the notes I wrote, players to watch. Actually, from my research, the players to watch on Mississippi State are defensive players, believe it or not.
Yeah.
It's on the defense. They're linebackers and cornerbacks. Forbes and Emerson making all SEC honors. So they've got some tools there.
Yeah.
The unknown is going to be that they're really young on the O side.
Yeah.
Nothing really stood out in my research about Mississippi State.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Offensive.
They got to find a quarterback that can get the ball to their playmakers. And it sounds like their defense is poised to be better this year.
Yeah.
But it's just a matter of, does Mike Leach have what he needs to be able to reload on offense?
And we know it's tough. I don't know if it gets any tougher than the SEC West, really.
Yeah, without a doubt, I don't think I would love for someone to try to argue this is the most competitive division in all of college football.
West.
Good grief.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's in dispute at all.
You have anything else on Mississippi State?
I don't.
All right, we'll move on. Next, we're going to talk about the Arkansas Razorbacks. 3-7 overall, 3-7 in SEC play last year. Their head coach is Mr. Sam Pittman. He is 59 years old. He is scheduled to make $3 million this year. He was a great recruiter at the University of Georgia, but can he coach in the SEC is the question.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of people that are really high on him, so I think that there's expectations there, and often with expectations, sometimes people tend to buckle under those expectations. But we'll see what ends up happening here. Felipe Franks, he's gone now, so they've got to be able to figure out this quarterback position. Again, this is the SEC. You can't not have a quarterback that can get the ball to your playmakers. And that's really, to me, that's what it begins and ends with them, is if they can't figure that out, then they really don't have much of a chance, in my opinion. But looking at their schedule, they have a schedule that they could probably do fairly well. And I think this is another one of those teams that, if they can figure out that quarterback position, they could be one of those teams that might sneak up on some folks down the road.
I completely agree. It's when you first look at the schedule, you're like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a low ceiling here.
Right.
But then if you think about it,
Mm-hmm.
just if they strike hot with running back / quarterback,
Yeah.
some of those iffy games could turn the other way.
Yeah,
In just a snap of a finger.
Yeah, they've got a few 50-50 games,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah. So you mentioned quarterback. They will be led by young quarterback KJ Jefferson. They are returning Traylon Burks, wide receiver. He was all SEC second team. So they have potential there for offense. I mean, again, the thing that they're facing is an SEC West schedule.
Yeah,
gosh.
it's a gauntlet for sure. I mean, because what we're saying is that their ceiling being so low, it's because of the conference they're in, really and truly. I mean, the division that they're in within their conference, even.
Yeah.
So I mean, they have a tough run of it. I mean, but honestly, I don't think they're going to be nearly as bad as some people think that they might be.
We'll see what our predictions are a little bit later on the show. Many of the final thoughts before we move on to the next?
Nope.
All right. We're going to discuss the Auburn Tigers next. They were 6-5 overall, 6-4 in SEC play. Their coach is Mr. Brian Harsin, 44 years old, first year to coach Auburn. He is scheduled to make $5.25 million.
Oof.
He coached,
Open that pocketbook up.
Now, unlike others, he's coached before, okay? So he's coached the last 10 years at Boise State, where he went 64-17. Any initial thoughts about the Auburn Tigers?
So I thought it was a horrible, horrible blunder on the part of Auburn to let Gus Malzahn go. I thought that was stupid. There always tends to be a bit of a lull whenever you let a big coach like that go. He's implemented a very specific type of system, offensive system, and they're gonna have to rebuild. Quite frankly, I mean it's just a recipe for kind of a down year for Auburn, in my opinion.
They've got a returning quarterback.
Yeah, they do. They got some games that they can definitely win. I mean, I'm not saying that they don't have the talent level. I mean, they're Auburn. They're going to have talent. Derek Mason's now their defensive coordinator, former head coach at Vandy.
That'd be interesting.
So, I mean, I think he's probably going to have some good stock to work with there. So anything can happen, but I mean, I'm kind of interested to see how this one turns out because, I guess 8 or 9 win seasons, they aren't acceptable at Auburn anymore. And particularly when you have a 5 or 6 win season, they think that that's a fireable offense. But that's kind of tough for me to swallow.
Well, when your cross-state rival is Alabama, they're doing everything they can to find the next Coach Saban for decades to come.
Yep.
So it's very easy to try to turn it over there to try to find that leader to be the head coach.
Absolutely.
Of the team. I wrote down player to watch. It just naturally starts with a quarterback, I think. Bo Nix last year had 2,415 yards, 12 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Their running back will have a lot to do with their success or lack thereof as well. Mr. Tank Bigsby last year had 834 yards, 6 yards per carry,
he's
5 touchdowns.
He's a really good running back. And, Bo Nix, it's going to be interesting to see how he adjusts to a new system now. I'm not a huge Bo Nix fan as far as how good or talented that he is or is not. But, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see if he can adjust to the system that's being brought in now. So we'll just have to see.
Well, I really think that the key is going to be new coach.
Yep.
Quarterback.
Then the running backs got to shoulder it, don't they?
And it's mostly it feels kind of like a rebuild.
It is.
I mean, like I said, a small reset.
You've got to expect it, right? You've got to expect a little bit of a down year.
Well, that's all I got on Auburn.
That's all I got too. I don't have much to say there. I mean, like I said, I think we're expecting a rebuild there.
War Eagle.
War effing Eagle.
Moving on to LSU, the Bayou Bengals.
Yeah.
Last year, they were 5-5 and also 5-5 in SEC play. Their head coach is Coach Ed Orgeron, 59 years old, scheduled to make $6 million. He has a record of 45-14 at LSU and the 2019 national champions.
Yep. So this is going to be the year that Eddie O needs to prove himself. I mean, I know last year was a weird year with COVID and everything and playing an all SEC schedule, but he's going to have to answer for what happened last year. He's going to have to come up with something because the talk about him being a flash in the pan is already started, so.
Well, that defense was unacceptable.
It was.
That was not
again,
LSU
you can't
defense.
win. You're right. It's not. It's totally out of character for an LSU team to give up that many points. Their offense was actually – they've scored some points. But, if you can't keep the other team from scoring, it's kind of tough. So can they reload? Good teams, elite teams like the Alabamas of the world, they reload every single year. This is going to be the year that Ed proves – can he reload or is he a flash in the pan, in my opinion?
So one of the questions I wrote down before I did my research was, who's the quarterback? Coach O says they have 2 championship quarterbacks, but I argue.
There's Newberry's rule here.
I argue, if you have 2, do you even have 1?
Boom.
Did you see anything on their quarterbacks?
Man, I'm with you. I mean, if you've got 2 quarterbacks, that means you have 0 quarterbacks. In my opinion, 100%. As a Tennessee fan, I've seen it many times.
I've seen it as a Florida fan.
So, I mean, you can't – if you're trying to figure that crap out in week 3, you forget it. You're done.
I don't like it. So
they got to figure that out first.
So, look, they'll have a chance. Let me tell you what they open with. They open at UCLA, then versus McNeese State, versus – Central Michigan before you enter SEC play, and even that's Mississippi State. So they're going to have at least a month to figure that out, right?
Yeah.
Before they get into the meat and potatoes.
They will, but I mean, I would think you would want your number one to get as many in-game reps as possible by then, and figuring it out in week 3 is not. It's not going to cut it whenever you get into SEC play.
Yeah, I've got their make or break month. Is when they play at home against Florida, at Ole Miss, at Alabama. Those 3 games could turn their season one way or the other.
Well, I'm going to tell you a game early on that might turn their season the wrong way, and that's their first SEC game against Mississippi State.
Okay.
We're going to find out really quick about that defense.
But, here's the thing. So, defense may win early. And we just touched on it with Mississippi State, that Mississippi State is returning a good defense.
Yeah.
So if offense isn't ready, then we could be looking at a 17-16 game.
That's what I'm saying.
One way or the other.
That's what I'm saying. And Mike Leach is the guy. He's not going to play it safe.
No.
So
Air raid.
But
yeah, LSU. Some other notes that I found on them. They are returning 16 starters.
Yeah.
The question mark is the big defense. Are they going to be able to turn around on the defensive side? Are we going to see more of the same? Because the upper tier in the SEC West didn't get weak.
No.
And we still have Alabama.
No. Well, and
Texas
that, like
A&M.
I said, this is the year that Eddie O proves that he is part of that upper tier. And if he's got to be able to get that defense in order if he wants to be in that elite level.
Yeah. So they've got the starters returning, so they're going to have plenty of ammunition there.
Yep.
They do a great job of recruiting.
Yeah,
because it's LSU.
Yeah,
and Coach
right.
O.
There's a lot of nostalgia and history and tradition there. I mean, oddly enough, one of the traditions is dominant defense. So I mean, I can't imagine that they would stay with a bad defense for very long.
Where's the D?
Exactly. That's it.
Moving on, we're going to go to Texas A&M. Last year they finished 9-1 overall. 8-1 in SEC play. Their head coach is Mr. Jimbo Fisher, 55 years old, set to make $7.5 million. He has a record of 26-10 while coaching Texas A&M. He was the 2014 national champion coach from Florida State University.
Yeah, I mean, what can you say? I mean, literally, just about everywhere he's been, he's just been successful. And what I have to say about Texas A&M is very simple. I think of just a couple words, one of which is dominant. And I mean, you look at their defense: 9 returning starters on defense. That is going to be hard to deal with for any team in the SEC West.
Yeah.
And I mean, offense, all their running backs are back, and most of the rest of their offense, quite frankly. I mean, they got a lot of offensive guys coming back. This is Jimbo's opportunity to challenge Saban for the West. I don't know whether he can actually get over that hump, but this is a Texas A&M team that both the Texas A&M fans and Jimbo Fisher has been waiting on for a long time to be able to actually challenge.
So
Alabama.
This is it. Their biggest question mark as the team is their quarterback.
Yeah, again, can they replace Kellen Mond?
Kellen Mond, drafted by the Minnesota Vikings. That's the biggest hole that they're going to have to fill. But everything you mentioned about running backs, receivers, defense, they're coming back, man. I remember Isaiah Spiller running wild on the Gators.
Yeah.
Isaiah Spiller returned. He had over 1,000 yards, 5.5 yards per carry, 9 touchdowns.
Yeah.
I mean, for the young quarterback, it's a scapegoat. You just throw
check it down.
Flare.
Check it down, check off. Whatever it is, man. You got experience there at the running back position. He got some playing time last year too.
I found some other names here. All SEC first team. Defensive end, Leal. Offensive tackle, Green. Tight end, Weidermeyer. I mean, this elite.
Is a loaded team.
Elite with a capital E, man.
Week 6, Alabama and Texas A&M. That is going to be a clash like none other. It's going to be a clash like we haven't seen in a while. I have a feeling.
Jimbo's choices are Zach or Haynes will be replacing Kellen Mond. Jimbo Fisher and the Texas A&M officials are not happy at the chance of Texas potentially joining the SEC down the road.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it interesting. You know, we talked about the SEC West being so competitive. Now we're talking about 2 teams joining that could potentially be in the West, and this is something we talked about on our last DDS.
Someone was listening to our podcast.
I know. We talked about this. I don't understand why there aren't other Texas teams in the SEC.
We made room. We eliminated 2, but I'm telling you, SEC's like, nah, we're not eliminating. We're just going to keep adding a super conference.
Well, you know, and that's been talked about for a while, the super conference conversation. And this might be an entire podcast that we do at a later time, because honestly, I think there could be a case for that.
Okay. But look, so Blake mentioned huge game versus Alabama. The key is Texas A&M is at home against Alabama.
That is huge.
Now here's 2 more that I have stars beside. Let's say they get past Alabama. They do it.
Mm-hmm.
I circled the last 2 games of the year. They are SEC matchups. One you have at home against Auburn. You got to win that. But it's at the end of the year, so don't have that letdown. Not at the end. And then you have to go, I'm sure it's going to be at night, LSU. You got to finish the season.
Yeah.
You can't win that one and then you pump the brakes. Yeah. You got to keep going.
Yeah, you got to. I just have a personal feeling that we'll get into a little more in depth later, but I believe their wins this year will be unmerciful and dominant.
All right.
I think they will have no mercy on anyone.
Nice. I like it. Any other notes
before we
move to Alabama?
That's all I got.
Alabama, you're up. Last year you were 13-0 overall, 10-0 in SEC play. Head coach Nick Saban, 69 years old, $9.3 million. He has 9 SEC championship titles, 7 national championship titles. What more can we say about this guy?
I mean,
Wow.
what can you say? I mean, coming off of one of probably the best college football teams we've ever seen last year. But this year, I'm looking at domination in all facets of the game again. Could they have another Heisman Trophy winner in Bryce Young? Possibly. I mean, he's looking at a $1 million endorsement deal right now. I mean, good God, the entire offense got drafted, and we're talking about them dominating again. It's absolutely insane.
6.
But it's
on that point, 6 Alabama Crimson Tide players went in the first round.
yeah. Was
There's
that
only
the
32
most?
picks.
Was that the most ever?
I mean,
It might be. It might have been. Somebody check us there. But it's just another reload for Saban. The depth that they have at every single position is sickening. And honestly, it could. I don't know how they would do it, but maybe this could end up changing college football rules at some point, because they are literally winning every single recruiting battle, every one of them. But I mean, their defense is loaded. I mean, they got the transfer from Tennessee, Henry To'o. I mean, their linebacker core is probably going to be the best in the nation, if I had to guess. Bryce Young stepping up at quarterback. He got a lot of playing time because, I mean, things got out of hand really quickly last year in most games. So, I mean, he's got quite a few reps. And, I mean, with some of the players that they have and the projections they have on them and the way that they develop players, I have no reason to believe that their wide receiver core is just going to be another force to be reckoned with.
it will be interesting to see. It's a little bit of a different type of quarterback than what Nick Saban has, the traditional pocket passer. So I'd be interested to see, what does that look like. Maybe it doesn't look any different at all.
Maybe
they just hand it off to Robinson, McClellan, Roydell Williams. Maybe they just go wild and with that big offensive line just stuff it down.
I mean, that's the
throats.
thing. I mean, they've got those big bulldozers up front. It really doesn't.
It literally
my
is.
my personal opinion is it doesn't matter who it is if you're behind that offensive line. But then you add on that they're freaking amazing running backs on top of it, and they just run away from people.
And I failed to mention Trey Sanders. I mean, there's another one. They got them coming out everywhere.
That's what I'm saying, dude. It is incredible that how many players he loses to the draft, but yet he always has 4 or 5 more in the cupboard.
Depth. The SEC standard, as we mentioned, and
dare I say the college football standard.
Well, he definitely wins on the recruiting front with freshman defensive back Kool-Aid McKinstry.
Kool-Aid.
KOOL-AID. Kool-Aid.
That's awesome. I hope that he is an awesome player because I want to hear his name called a lot.
Boy, so Alabama, just naturally being in the SEC, the games that I've highlighted is week 3 against Florida. They have to go on the road to Florida and a rematch of the SEC title game. Both teams are in similar positions, transitioning at quarterback.
On paper.
I'll talk more about Florida on the SEC East prediction show, but that'd be a very interesting game. That's their first road game, first SEC game.
Yep.
They will be tested to what extent? I don't know.
Yeah.
But then, of course, we've already highlighted the Texas A&M game. That's another road game.
Yep.
On the road. And then, again, the very last game of the year.
Man.
It's another road game.
It does so
at Auburn.
That's my thing is these are the trap games that sometimes these elite teams fall into. They cannot turn it off a game early, particularly in a rivalry game. I always say this: nothing matters in a rivalry game because they play harder, the players play harder, the coaches coach harder. So I mean, it is 100%. Going to come down to can they stay focused all year.
You are the SEC standard. We'll talk about our predictions in just a moment. But for now, we're going to go ahead and call our guest. Mr. Matthew Parker is going to chime in.
Absolutely.
With some SEC West thoughts and SEC predictions for the West.
Dylan.
All right, Parker, you're live with us here. SEC West prediction show.
Beautiful.
Did you want to talk a little bit about the eliminator before we get started with Vanderbilt and Missouri getting kicked.
I would. You guys were going down the right path, but you ended up with the wrong team.
Okay. Tell us more.
I'm all about Missouri. I'm on board. But Vanderbilt, you can't kick out Vanderbilt. And I've got one reason. Well, I've got a lot of reasons why, but one reason that automatically protects 10 teams in the SEC. You cannot remove a founding member of the SEC from the early 30s. You just cannot remove any of those guys. Vanderbilt is protected from being an original founder. Yes, their facilities are awful. I went to every Tennessee Oilers game there in the late 90s, and then I went to a game a couple of years ago, and I didn't know there was any different 20 years later. The team's dreadful. But another one of your arguments was that Vandy has no history, and I completely disagree with that. Vandy's got a lot of history, honestly. I mean, they got Cutler. They had Bill Wade, who was the first pick in the NFL draft, Tom Moore, Corey Harris, Will Wolford. They have a lot of people. You can't kick out an original founder. And on top of that, everybody needs a Vandy. We don't want a team league full of Alabamas and Georgias and Floridas and Tennessee. I want a Vandy on my schedule every now and then. I want to go to an away game where it's 90% of the fans. I know that's listed as a bad thing, but I feel it is a good thing. Every conference has that Vandy. The team that should be removed, other than Missouri, which 100% on board, is South Carolina. South Carolina doesn't have history. They're brought in the early 90s. South Carolina's greatest historical person to do with their team is a head coach from another football team.
Yeah.
South Carolina has what? Clowney, Lattimore, Alshon Jeffrey. Are you going to hang your hat with them? The best thing about South Carolina was George Rogers back in the late 70s. He won the Heisman. But that was 12 years before they ever joined the SEC. So I vote Vandy in.
Okay.
And South Carolina out.
I definitely respect.
Yeah.
The argument was fantastic.
So yeah, that was a great argument. And we actually kind of hinted on something a little bit like this at lunch today, because we were like, why are they even still here? And I got to thinking, I was like, they were, I think they were one of the first SEC teams. So
yeah,
that actually makes it. And I also, as you were saying all that, I'm sitting here thinking, because one of my big arguments on a lot of these teams is which one of these teams do I want to go to their stadium? And though I don't really care to go to Vanderbilt Stadium, why would anybody not want to come to Nashville?
West End, man. It's great.
That's what I'm saying. So, I mean, it's a huge draw. So, with that being said, I mean, your argument for South Carolina, I think, is a very valid one. I think it was one of them we eyed very closely during that discussion. And I personally...
It may just be a lot of us from the Middle Tennessee area just wanting Vanderbilt's administration to do something.
Yeah.
I think you guys are right. And I actually am kind of a fan of the new administration. I think they're going down the right path. The new coach, how many, we talk about with the Jacksonville and you get the first overall pick, everything seems happy and with new things. But I actually think this one might be the right hire for Vandy. I mean, he was a coach there. He's a player there, student there, and knows what it takes.
I'm all for it.
Yeah.
I'm all for it. So we're doing the SEC West right here. Go ahead with your thoughts and predictions for the West.
I'll start this bottom going up.
All right.
7. I've got Arkansas at 5-7, which I also consider for the elimination, by the way.
We did too.
Yeah, I mean, definitely could consider them for that. Arkansas, they're going to be last. I mean, they've got a promising quarterback there. The only really good thing that I've got with Arkansas, all 5 offensive linemen are back. Cohesion is the king with offensive line. Although they're not great, they're all returning. So that's, it's an upside for them. Coming at 6th, I've got Mississippi State. Mississippi State is probably the toughest in the West for me to pick. I mean, Mike Leach there. They've got another year for the air raid to figure it out. They finished 3-7, I believe, last year. But to get to 3-7, they won their last 2 games. Mm-hmm. So it's a really tough one to see where that one's going, but I do like the direction that they're going. What was y'all's thoughts on Mississippi State?
So Mississippi State, we called out that their defense showed out a little better than what we thought and maybe even remembered. So that's the first good starting point here. Unfortunately for both Arkansas and Mississippi State, they just find themselves in the SEC West.
Yeah.
It's not a very easy schedule just because you're there.
They're two teams trying to rebuild their programs in the toughest division in college football.
I'm with you on the defense because the defense was sneaky good last year. In the SEC, I believe it was 4th in yards allowed in all of the SEC. Their starters are great, but their depth is not very good.
And
but their starters are very good. Coming in at 5, I have got the Auburn Tigers. You got a new coach there. O-line's a major issue. They lost their top 3 pass catchers from 2020. I know their coach is known for bringing up quarterbacks, so I'm optimistic that he can help Bo Nix. I know they've got a big transfer from LSU and TJ Finley. So it's a lot of unanswered questions, but it's a lot like said, their biggest thing is they're playing in the SEC West.
Yeah, and we mentioned that they have a month that could swing it from a 5-win team all the way up to maybe an 8-win team when you go back to back to back at LSU versus Georgia at Arkansas. That month is going to be crucial right there.
It's brutal. I mean, it's absolutely brutal. It's murderous row stretch. I mean, the next one I've got, so we go from 5 Auburn to 4th to Ole Miss. Super high-powered offense. They did lose Elijah Moore. Their defense is a major problem. If that offense scores 39 points a game, they'll lose every game because their defense gave up 40 points.
Yep.
The offense isn't to go without blame. I believe they had 18 turnovers last year, so Ole Miss is going to figure it in 8-4 for me. Number 3, I'm expecting a major rebound from LSU. What about you, fellas? I could see LSU kind of all over the map for different predictions.
So LSU is going to be Blake mentioned it on the podcast. It's going to test Coach O this year. We're going to test his depth. We're going to test his hiring ability, his adaptability with the defense. The defense was totally unacceptable. LSU is one of those teams where you come down to the bayou at night and you get punched in the mouth.
Yep.
But people were going down to the bayou at night and they were just having fun.
Exactly. This is another one of those teams that I think that there is such a huge gap between floor and ceiling as to what their record could look like. I mean, because I think Coach O is on a mission this year because he wants to be considered one of those elite level coaches. And I mean, quite honestly, LSU should be whatever that means, should be an elite level college football team. And the defense last year just did not prove it. And I know it was a COVID year and things were weird, but that's not acceptable at LSU. So he's going to have to answer for that this year.
I agree. I think they go 10-2. They also, if you remember, since the world ended last year and it's hard to remember anything, from the year prior when they won the national championship, I think they only had 5 starters back from 2019 to 2020. So they take a major hit not having a full offseason to get everything together. I think they get it together this year. They have the best cornerback duo in the country. And Bradley, you mentioned it. Yeah. People are going down to LSU and punching them in the mouth. They need to be able to punch people in the mouth with their run game. Last year, they only averaged 3.3 yards per carry. And for a team that's known for just offensively over the last few years, that is unacceptable.
And, we'll talk about this when we do some NFL talk, but what's the best way you can help out a struggling defense? Run the rock.
That is right.
Run the rock. Keep the clock going.
I wouldn't know anything about that as a Titans fan.
I guess you would. So, but to your point, they do have 16 starters returning, but show us the defense. Yep. Where's the D? Let's go.
All right, number 2, guys, right. And I honestly thought about putting this one number 1. Number 2, I have got Texas A&M. I've got Texas A&M actually going undefeated until their last 3 games where they lose 2 of their last 3. I have them losing to Ole Miss and LSU. Like we were talking about Ole Miss earlier, I do think Ole Miss is going to jump up and bite somebody. like unexpectedly, and I believe that is going to be Texas A&M. They're only one spot from the playoffs last year. They got one of the best backfields in college football. Jimbo Fisher, I mean, I'm not too worried about who's throwing the ball. He's known for developing somebody like that. They do have to replace 4 offensive line starters. And the defense is legit. It's one of their strengths. You know, last year,
big time.
9
they only allowed
returners.
2. What was that one? What was
Nine returners. 9 returning defensive players.
And they only allowed 2 teams to pass for more than 240 yards against them all of last year. I believe that they will beat the number 1 team, Alabama.
Wow.
Alabama will have 1 loss. It will be to Texas A&M. What can you say about Alabama? You know, I mean, Nick Saban. You know, it's where people that have gone awry in their career go and completely restart it. Lane Kiffin this year, Bill O'Brien. I'm not worried about Bryce Young. They've obviously lost some defensive players with Surtain and Barmore, but it's Alabama. They're going to have everybody there, and this is kind of a side note of why I think they're going to be number 1. If y'all saw from SEC Media Days, you know, they're talking about trying to have 80% of the teams vaccinated, and I believe it's 4 out of the 14 have that now. And Alabama is one of the teams that have more than 80%. There's going to be forfeitures this year. I believe that, because they're not going to move stuff around a lot like the NFL is.
No.
And you're going to have some of these teams that are just going to lose because they're not allowed to play. And just do what Nick Saban's doing. Everybody, because he obviously knows the path. And just by having that number, I think it might buy him a win.
It may.
Yeah.
But would it even matter? I mean, they were just coming to the slaughter anyway.
Exactly.
But it may give him another. My point though is it may give him a whole nother week's rest.
Boy,
You know, they may play.
Yeah, that could change a lot of things this year, for those forfeitures.
It absolutely could. So I think Alabama comes out of it. I do think it's really a 2-team race, and I would not be shocked though if A&M ended up doing that.
So
But
it's interesting that you called out Texas A&M projected to beat Alabama, and we haven't given our thoughts yet, but I'll go ahead and admit right now, I have Texas A&M beating Alabama in that game.
Yep.
But I called out to Blake earlier when we were previewing these teams. When you beat Alabama, you can't have that letdown game.
No.
You can't take a breath. You got to keep going, keep trucking.
You're right.
I found something interesting with Alabama was I didn't even realize till I did this research. Their first SEC game is on the road in Gainesville, the Swamp.
Yep.
I did not know that. They're going.
I didn't know that either.
They're at Florida. Of course, I got the star next to. They're at Texas A&M, and then in the season at Auburn. All 3 of those are road games with a new quarterback. Not to say they're going to get tested very much, but it leaves the door a little open there, a little cracked.
Yeah.
The one thing you're right about that letdown game, because that is big with Alabama. Texas A&M does have one of the teams that shouldn't be in SEC afterwards at Missouri, so they should be able to handle that.
Yeah. They're playing a high school team.
So we can review it. Yeah, let's review. So we got you with Alabama 11-1, Texas A&M 10-2, LSU 10-2, Ole Miss 8-4. I missed the records for Auburn and Mississippi State.
7-5.
7-5. 7-5, and Arkansas 5-7.
5-7. Correct.
Well, I definitely thank you for taking the time to give us some insight. It sounded really great. We'll call you back here, and we'll do some SEC East as well.
Sounds good, fellas.
All right.
Put Vandy back in.
Enjoy. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. That was Matthew Parker. Thank you for your insight and information there. That was fantastic. But it's time.
Yep.
It's time for the Dad Code presenting the SEC West 2021 predictions. And we can do it just like that. If you want to start with the bottom, or if you want to go team by team, I don't care.
Man, it doesn't really matter to me. Honestly, I'll probably end up changing some of my records as we go, because there are just some of these teams, like we've talked about, they've got so many 50-50 games that it could go anywhere.
All right.
Or any way, rather.
Yeah. So
So what do you have? I got Auburn here. I'm on Auburn right here. So we'll just start with that. Auburn, I mean, I expect to be a down year. I expect it. I've got them at 5-7, 2-6 in conference.
Do you have a range?
I do.
Or is that
I've got a floor of. I think that is their floor. I think 5-7 is their floor, but I think they could be as good as 8-4. They've just got some of those games, like an Ole Miss, like an LSU. Honestly, I mean, could they win a couple of those two games? Could they sneak up on Alabama? I don't think so. But that remains to be seen.
Yeah. I am fearlessly predicting Auburn to be right in the middle. A 500 football team at 6-6
It's very
is
possible.
my prediction, which will land them 1, 2, 3. I guess that would be 5th.
Yeah.
Land them 5th in the SEC East
Yep.
at 6-6.
Okay. All right. I'll just turn as I go here. All right, I got Arkansas next.
All right.
I've got them again I got them at 5-7 also. Excuse me, at 6-6. I'm sorry, 6-6.
A game better. than Auburn.
I do. I think they're going to sneak up and bite some folks. I think their floor, they could be as bad as 3-9. I think they could be as good as 7-5. But I think they're going to be a middle of the road team. There's a chance that they could sneak up and bite some folks, like Parker was saying. Could they sneak up on Ole Miss? Maybe. I've got them potentially upsetting Auburn. I don't know if that will really be an upset or not this year, but I think some people will view it as such. And LSU, I mean, LSU is that's a big question mark. And there's questions as to whether or not they'll actually beat Missouri or not.
Yeah, I've said earlier that this record swings in the last month of the year when Arkansas has Mississippi State, LSU, Alabama, and Missouri. I am predicting Arkansas to go 4-8 this year, which will put them, just as Parker had them, in last place in the SEC West.
I could see that. I could definitely see that. All right, next I have LSU written down here. I've got them going 7-5 this year.
Okay, so Parker was pretty bullish. Parker had them at 10-2.
Yeah, he did. I'm kind of a little more middle of the road here. I'm not so convinced that Ed Orgeron can turn things around this year. I personally like Ed Orgeron as a coach. I think that he's a perfect fit for LSU. Now, their floor I think is 6-6, so they're pretty. That's pretty close to their floor, but they're high. They could go 10-2. They could. I mean, they could absolutely turn it around.
They could get hot and go 11-1.
I mean, the talent, they always have the talent. So it's a matter of putting all the pieces together at this point. So, I mean, it's just a matter of can they win the big games? Can they win the games that they're supposed to win and not let anybody sneak up on them?
Look, I have them going 3rd in the SEC West. I'm predicting LSU to go 8-4. And I just think that until you prove it to me, I think they're going to slip up against Florida, Alabama, Texas A&M, and one more along the way is what I'm predicting. But I agree. They could swing anywhere from I mean, maybe 7-5 all the way up to 10 wins.
I mean, it just depends. I mean, because there's other teams out there that might sneak up on them. I've got Mississippi State upsetting them. So we'll just have to see how much of an upset that actually is this year.
But I think they're coming in 3rd behind the two big boys.
Let's see. I've got Mississippi State next.
Okay.
I've got them at 7-5, 3-5 in conference with a floor of 4-8. They could go as high as 9-3, but I think that 9-3 is very, very much a pipe dream. I don't think that they're going to beat all those teams in there. I don't think that they're going to really be able to compete with the Texas A&Ms and the Alabamas of the world. They could prove me wrong. As we've said that, Mike Leach is known for causing chaos. So, I mean, it's just a matter of how good that defense is and can they correct all the turnovers.
Yeah, I think the defense will be fine but tested, if that makes sense. They have a stretch of LSU, Texas A&M, and Bama.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
That's tough.
Can you survive? And I'm not talking about win one of those. I'm just, can you come out of that stretch healthy, alive, to be able to win the rest of the games, I'm forecasting Mississippi State 5-7.
Okay.
And I think that I'm thinking that the best for Mississippi State would be 50-50, 6-6.
Yeah, well, I had them upsetting Ole Miss in the last game.
Okay.
So we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. And speaking of Ole Miss, I got Ole Miss next.
Right.
I actually have them down as 9-3.
Okay. Bullish.
I am. I'm bullish on old Lane Kiffin this year.
Parker had them at 8-4.
I've got them with a floor of 6-6, so they could actually be significantly worse, in my opinion. And they're almost to their ceiling because I have their ceiling is at 10-2. It is 100% going to be dictated by can Matt Corral not throw so many interceptions this year. It's what it's all going to come down to, honestly. I mean, can they win these games that they're supposed to win? You know, can they beat a Tennessee team? You know, things like that. Going to Knoxville. I mean, that's going to be a big game for them. I have them being upset by Mississippi State, but there's a couple games on here like the LSU game, the Auburn game. I've got them winning those two, but
could go either way.
They could drop those very easy.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's maybe unlike any other that we've done so far. I feel like they jump out the gates with 3-0. And then I see the end of their schedule with Vandy and Arkansas. I've got them winning both of those. You got a toss-up game, the rivalry with Mississippi State, the swing game kind of in the middle with having to travel to Tennessee, Lane Kiffin returning to Knoxville, a place that he burned a lot of bridges, a swing game. I'm going to just forecast. I'm going to can't bring it back just a little bit because I'm afraid of the number 8. So I'm going to go 7-5. For Ole Miss, good for 4th place in the SEC West.
Okay. All right. Texas A&M University. I've got them going 11-1, 7-1 in conference. I've got a low for them at 9-3. I do not think that they will at all approach that 9-3 record. They could be 12-0. They could, if they can pull it off against Alabama and stay focused for the rest of the year. I think that they could. It's not outside of the realm of possibility that they could go undefeated.
Yeah. So Parker had them at 10-2.
Yeah. I think that's
10-2,
tough.
but winning Alabama is what he said.
Yeah.
So I've got them winning against Alabama, but losing somewhere along the way. I've predicted them to go 11-1 and being the SEC West representative in Atlanta. Man. Because of the head-to-head game. I think both Alabama and Texas A&M have the same record. Okay. I think they both have the same amount of SEC losses, which comes down to the head-to-head.
Yep.
And I'd say Texas A&M wins at home.
Absolutely.
So 11-1.
It could happen.
I've got you projected to be number 1 in the SEC West.
Wow. And then the Alabama Crimson Tide. I've got them as 12-0, 8-0 in SEC play. I mean, for me, it's going to come down to the Texas A&M game. I don't really see many teams other than maybe the Auburn game because it's a rivalry game and everything kind of goes out the window when it's a rivalry that maybe they could slip up. I mean, going to Florida is their first on road SEC game. Yeah, that could be a pretty early test, but I think that they'll handle it pretty well. I just have my personal opinion is Texas A&M and Alabama are a distant first and second compared to the rest of the SEC West.
I couldn't agree more. And my prediction shows exactly that. I think they have the exact same record as Texas A&M at 11-1. As much as it pains me to predict that they're going to beat Florida Gators in Florida, but the Gators are going to have to prove it. Well, We'll talk more about them later. But I've got them going 11-1. The only slip up that I projected was at Texas A&M, and therefore, because of the tiebreaker, Alabama does not make it to the SEC title game. However, firmly in the playoffs, national title playoffs.
Yeah, man. I think the picture is definitely getting clearer as we're getting closer to the season. I think we had some pretty similar opinions here.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty important to point out that, you know, we give these ranges for a reason, because I mean there's a few teams in the West in particular that there's so many 50-50 games that could go either way. Yeah. And then there's a few teams that I think are dangerous. They're dangerous, but they're not really good. They're not going to threaten to win the West. They're just dangerous to teams like Alabama and Texas A&M that they might bite some of these elite teams.
Absolutely. As we wrap up the show here, we'll go ahead and show you on one slide here all three of our predictions between myself, Blake, and Matthew Parker. We thank you so much for taking the time to hit play and download the podcast. The Dad Code presents DDS, the 2021 SEC West Prediction Show.
Y'all be well.
Thank you.